Hello there, friends and enemies, and welcome back once again to fan-made Yu-Gi-Oh! Mechanics. I have been having so much fun with these fan-made card types that I thought, let's just keep going. I have found a bunch new cards this week, so we're going to start off jumping right in with Evolution Monsters. Here we have Nebula Armor Paladin. I enjoy the frame, actually. I think the frame is nice. I think the little stars on the end look kind of nice for a new card type. Evolution monsters are a special kind of extra deck monster that are placed on top of the monster stated on the card and have the same monster subtype, attribute, or monster type as the card required, with evolution being the additional subtype. That's kind of a lot, but basically what it means is that it is going to have a monster that it is required to have on the field to be summoned. You're going to place this monster on top of that monster, and those two monsters should have the same attribute, monster type, or subtype. Evolution monsters have evolved tiers, which I assume is what those stars in the upper left-hand corner are. The monster under the evolution monster is considered not to be on the field, so just like regular material. You cannot place an evolution monster on top of another evolution monster, and I feel like that should go without saying, but that is an important distinction because if this were to be played, some people would try and use that discrepancy. When an evolution monster leaves the field due to battle or leaving due to a non-fusion summon card effect, that is very specific, the monster underneath stays on the field, but it cannot attack or be used for an evolution summon until the next turn. I feel like that's fine. You can evolution summon as many times as you want as long as you have the required monster to do so. And they cannot be summoned from the graveyard or from the banish pile. So we got a little bit of restriction there just to make sure that they're not being overpowered. I love his art. I gotta say, I love the art here. I think this art is really nice. Nebula Armor Paladin requires Nova Armor Paladin to be played. When this card is evolution summoned, you can special summon one Nebula token, but you cannot summon monsters for the rest of the turn except Star Warrior or Cosmic monsters. You can only use this effect of Star Armor Paladin once per turn. Once per turn, quick effect, you contribute one monster you control and have this card gain that monster's attack. Then monsters your opponent currently controls have their attack halved. Also, this card can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. This effect lasts until the end of turn. So before I talk about the card effect, I do want to say I'm not going to be going over new monster types. While different monster types can have different gimmicks, like psychic types pay life points and the new illusion types do the whole during battle neither monster battling can be destroyed. I just feel like if we were to look at new card types, it would take forever, so I'm just looking at the new mechanics. Disclaimer over, so talking about this monster, I think this monster's fine. I would say that it feels overpowered, but as long as you can just get this monster off of the field, it's not coming back. I assume the only way that evolution monsters would be able to come back is if another evolution monster allowed them to. I don't think I necessarily like evolution monsters, but they do definitely seem interesting. And evolution monsters have another step up, and that is Beyond Monsters. Here we have Interstellar Armor Paladin, our Beyond monster for this video. I think the frame of the card is kind of cluttery. It doesn't look pleasing in my mind. The stars look fine, but they're not as cool as the stars on the Beyond monster. But they don't necessarily have to be, and that's just fine. Let's take a look at how Beyond monsters work. So, much like evolution monsters, they have Beyond tiers, and they are placed on top of evolution monsters. You can only control one Beyond monster, and you can only Beyond summon once per turn. So kind of like pendulum summoning, except instead of the possibility of getting multiple cards out, you're just getting this one monster out. Beyond monsters return to the extra deck at the beginning of the end phase of the turn that they were summoned, with the evolution monsters staying on the field. They cannot be summoned from graveyard or from the banish pile. I don't know how I feel about the effect of them returning to the extra deck, but let's take a look at this monster and see how I feel about it specifically. So, Interstellar Armor Paladin, once again, a pretty good job with the art, if I say so myself. I really hope this art is not AI generated. Requires Nebula Armor Paladin to be summoned. Okay, so it's the step up from the other card that we just saw. When this card is Beyond summoned, you can special summon 2 tier/level 4 Star Warrior and or Cosmic monsters with their effects negated. You can only use this effect of Interstellar Armor Paladin once per turn. Once per turn, quick effect, you contribute up to 2 monsters, and if you do, This monster gains the combined attack of the attributed monsters. Then the attack of all monsters your opponent currently controls becomes 0. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effect in response. This effect lasts until end of turn. If I'm being honest, I'm not sure how I feel about this card. It's definitely very powerful, but if you're able to successfully slap your opponent with it, then once this card goes back to the extra deck, you can just play it again next turn. I feel like if this were to be integrated into the game, rather than having it be that you can only control one Beyond monster, you should only be able to have one Beyond monster in your deck. And even then, I'm not sure how I feel about Armor Paladin. Maybe Beyond monsters could be fine, but they're not my cup of tea as far as I see. Moving on, we got Hyper Dragons, which I picked because I thought the rainbow of the stars and the frame looked really fun and nice, although I'm sure if this were to be printed, it would blast your eyes out. So Hyper Monsters, they are extra deck monsters, and they are summoned to the extra monster zone, main monster zone, or to a zone a link monster points to. I feel like that ruling's not necessary, just kind of sounds like they're a regular extra deck monster. They have tiers instead of levels, they can be set face down, and there are 2 ways of summoning Hyper Monsters. The first is by sending 2 or more monsters whose total levels, ranks, link ratings, or tiers equal the tier of the Hyper Monster you want to summon. An example is by sending a level 5 and 3 monster to summon a tier 8. And the second is like how you Xyz summon an Xyz monster. You need 2 monsters of the same level, rank, link rating, or tier. An example of this is by sending 2 level 6 monsters to the graveyard to bring out a tier 6. I feel like by allowing your extra deck monster to have 2 different types of summoning requirements, you open up too much room for confusion, especially if there are players who may not know the rule, players who forget the rule. As a player looking at this for the first time, this is seemingly just as complicated as Pendulum Monsters in my opinion, just because as a player, I would pick a summoning requirement and stick to it. And on the off chance that I remembered the other one, it could be a little too late. But that's just how I view it, just looking at it for the first time. So let's take a look at Signet Code Dragon and see what's up. Art very obviously inspired by Firewall. So this requires 2 or more monsters whose total levels or tiers equals 8. When this card is hyper summoned, you can return any number of cards on the field equal to the number of hyper material used to summon this card, and if you do, this card gains 300 attack for each card returned to the hand. If this card or another card you control would be destroyed by an opponent's card effects, you lose 300 life points instead. Okay, I like this card. I think this would be the card that would be in the starter pack for introducing this mechanic. It's got a pretty decent but not overly powerful effect with a good drawback. You can choose to take a ping to your life points instead. Although I would say to make the stakes be a little bit higher, maybe make the life point loss a little bit more, or maybe the deck that this card could be in could be about losing life points. Paying life points for the costs of cards. Much like the first 2, I am not quite sure if I am a fan of Hyper Monsters, but this card specifically looks like it would be a fun card to just play at least once. Moving on, we have Duo Direction cards with this Duo spell card that has this symbol. Not sure what that is. I looked at this card and I went, ooh, interesting. It's kind of like the Magic dual cards, Duo Direction cards are a special property that can be seen on select spell and trap cards. This card has 2 directions, north and south, each is tied to an effect. Each player will be applied an effect based on which side is facing that player. Okay. The owner who activated this card can activate it the normal way or activate it upside down so the south side points to them. Seems fine enough. I'm still not sure what this helix symbol is. The person down there said that there was no placeholder for it. No templates are publicly available yet since the helix symbol needs a replacement. The finished product will be more resembling a compass to go with the north-south theme, which is wild to me because that's kind of what the field spell symbol is like a compass. So you'd have to have a little more of a distinct symbol for this card if you were going to do something like that. So for the north side, when this card is activated, the player this side points to can send monsters they control to the graveyard until they only control one type of monster. On each of the end phases, they will, if they control more than one type of monster, inflict 700 damage for each different type of monster they control. South side effect, when this card is activated, the player this card points to can send monsters they control to the graveyard until they only control monsters of one attribute. On each of the end phases, if they control monsters with more than one attribute, inflict 1000 damage for each different attribute of monster they control. So obviously, this card would be meant for a deck that is all one type or one attribute, kind of like Sprites or Volcanic. It's kind of something that you would play in your deck if you have cards of all one thing, and if your opponent didn't. It kind of helps to force you to think about what you're doing when you're playing it. Overall, I think I like Duo Direction cards. They seem interesting enough, and I can think of different ways that making cards like this could be fun to play with. My only stipulation is that I feel like you should have a different requirement for which side you have facing you. As the owner of the card, if you're going to be playing this card and you have the fluidity to play it with either effect facing you or your opponent, each effect should have a specific requirement if you would like that effect to face you as the owner of the card. Or at least, since the north side is the normal side of the card, the north side would be the normal way that you would play, but if you'd like to play the south side, you would be required to do something as a cost. That way it might make the card a little more fair, although I suppose that already having to draw into this card would be the thing that would force you to think about your plays in the first place. So I don't know, maybe I'm wrong with that, but I do still think that this card, this mechanic, is a fun mechanic. Overall, I enjoyed the last two mechanics. I wasn't a big fan of the first two, and that's where I'm going to leave the video off this time. I had a few more things I wanted to show you, but I can just save those for another video. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're enjoying these fan-made mechanics as much as I am. I'm just kind of having fun with them, conceptualizing how they would be played and reading how they work. Some of these people find the perfect images for the art of the cards that they create, and it just seems like a fun way for the Yu-Gi-Oh community to interact. Let me know how you feel about these summoning mechanics, and let me know if you've got any more. Some of you have left me suggestions in the comments before, but I haven't been able to find some of them, so if you're able to leave me a link, that would be great. Thank you for watching. Once again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, as always, drink your water.